Sometimes destiny doesn't ignore you. It just waits for the right moment to listen. The alarm went off at 5:45 in the morning. The sharp sound echoed inside the narrow room where Michael Carter had lived for almost a year. Peeling walls, a ceiling stained with humidity, and a window facing a dark alley. Nothing there resembled the man he once was. The smell of oil, rust, and burnt coffee clung to everything, as if it had fused with his skin. He rose slowly, slipped on his worn-out boots, and tied the laces with quiet, steady hands. In the cracked mirror, his reflection showed a tired face, deep circles under the eyes, and a gaze that avoided the past. He grabbed his jacket and reached into his pocket. He felt the crumpled paper. The letter, the same letter he had written 3 years earlier, inside a cold cell, when he still believed he could explain everything to his son. What I wanted most was to tell you that your father is not a thief. But the letter never left that envelope. Outside, Cincinnati was still waking up. The morning air carried the metallic scent of factories. Trucks roared down the main avenue. Michael walked toward the industrial yard where he did odd repair jobs. It was the only place that accepted an ex-convict without asking too many questions, as long as he didn't look anyone in the eye for too long. When he arrived, the gate was already open. 3 men were talking near the garage. The new supervisor, Tom Reynolds, spun a wrench between his fingers, wearing the grin of someone who enjoyed being feared. "Well, look who's back," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "The famous Carter." Michael pretended not to hear. He walked to a forklift parked in the corner, crouched down, and began to remove the panel. The metallic click of bolts loosening was the only sound that calmed him. The one moment in the day when the world made sense. But Tom's dry laugh cut through the air. "Careful, folks. Keep your wallets close. This guy's got a reputation for making things disappear." A couple of workers laughed awkwardly. Another looked away. Michael took a deep breath. He had learned long ago that arguing was useless. Shame sticks to your skin like old grease. It doesn't wash off easily. The wind carried the distant sound of a siren. He tightened a bolt, adjusted a loose wire, and turned the ignition. The forklift coughed, sputtered, then came to life, running, barely but alive. The laughter stopped for a moment. Tom folded his arms. "Beginner's luck," he muttered. "Let's see if you last a full shift without breaking anything." Michael didn't answer. He grabbed a rag, wiped his hands, and looked toward the grey horizon of the city. For a brief moment, he imagined his son, Ethan, 8 years old, sitting somewhere in a classroom, maybe writing an essay about what he wanted to be when he grew up. He wondered if the boy still remembered him. He slipped the letter back into his pocket and kept working. The forklift's engine pulsed like a tired heart, but still beating, the sound of survival. Tom walked away, satisfied with his little victory. But one of the younger workers kept staring at Michael differently, not with pity, not with judgment, but with something else. Curiosity. The day was just beginning, and Michael had no idea that destiny was about to open that letter. Not through his hands, but through time itself. Some places don't judge what you do. They judge what they think you are. The main warehouse of Reed & Sons Logistics was a living organism made of steel and smoke. Cables hung from the ceiling, the hum of machinery filled the air, and the scent of burnt oil mixed with that of stale coffee from an old thermos forgotten in a corner. Michael had worked there for 8 years. Before prison, that place was his world. Every motor, every noise, every leak, all of it carried his touch. Now he was back as a temp worker, paid by the hour. No ID badge, no name on the wall. He crouched beside the forklift, wrench in hand, when a calm, female voice called out, "Carter?" He turned slowly. A woman with tied-up hair and a light blue uniform held a clipboard. Her eyes were sharp, her expression steady. "I'm Sarah Miller, head of fleet maintenance," she said, offering her hand. "They told me you know these machines better than anyone." Michael shook her hand, hesitant. "I know enough to keep them alive one more day." Sarah smiled faintly. "Here, that's a miracle." While she checked her notes, a young man from the team, Ben, walked over. "Hey, Sarah," he whispered, nodding toward Michael. "You know who that guy is, right?" "I know," she replied without looking up. "And I also know none of you fixed half as much as he did in 2 hours." Ben looked down, embarrassed. Michael pretended not to hear, but inside, the words stayed. For the first time in a long time, someone had defended him. The growl of an engine broke the moment. It was Tom Reynolds, the supervisor, testing a truck. "Hey, Carter!" he yelled. "If you're so good, fix this brake. It's locking up again." Michael walked over. The truck's hood was open, air hissing through the compressor, the pedals soft as butter. "Anyone touched this before?" he asked. "2 mechanics. Neither could fix it," Tom replied, smirking. "But go ahead. Maybe our prison engineer will get lucky." The others stopped working, watching. It was the kind of moment that decides who you are to people. A trial, not a task. Michael opened the lower panel, ran his fingers along the hoses, and touched the valve. He felt it immediately. The mistake wasn't mechanical. It was human. A reversed connection. "Hand me the 17mm wrench," he said quietly. Tom hesitated, then handed it over. Within minutes, Michael adjusted the valve, tightened the coupling, and started the engine. The hissing stopped. The brakes held firm. Silence. Tom frowned, disbelief spreading across his face. Sarah stepped closer, writing something on her clipboard. "Impressive," she said softly. "No one noticed that the hoses were reversed." Michael shrugged. "When you listen, the machine tells you what's wrong." Ben stared at him with admiration. Tom looked away, pretending not to care. "Just luck," he muttered, turning his back. "Don't get used to it." But Sarah kept watching him. There was something in her gaze, not pity, not curiosity, but respect. She saw more than a man trying to survive. She saw someone who still had soul in his work. When the shift ended, Michael washed his hands, put on his jacket, and walked toward the exit. Outside, the sun was sinking behind the chimneys. The city looked tired. He stopped at a diner on the corner and ordered a black coffee, paid with the few bills he had left. As he waited, a newspaper headline caught his eye on the counter. "New sabotage at local trucking company." The company name was the same one printed on his badge, Reed and Sons. Michael froze. Destiny, silent as ever, had just turned the next page of his story. People don't need proof to point fingers. They just need someone lower than themselves. The next morning, the warehouse buzzed with tension. Word about the new sabotage case had spread fast. Another truck had its transmission destroyed overnight. No one knew who did it. Or maybe everyone thought they did. Michael arrived early as usual. The air was heavy, carrying the mix of diesel and gossip. He crossed the yard, feeling the stares before hearing the whispers. "There he is," one mechanic muttered. "Figures," said another. "Wherever that guy goes, something breaks." Michael kept walking, face blank, shoulders straight. He'd learned how to walk through storms without an umbrella. Pretend the rain doesn't reach you. Inside, Tom was already waiting, leaning against a toolbox with a smirk. "Well, well," he said loud enough for everyone to hear. "Guess what, gentlemen? Another sabotage last night. And guess who had the keys to the maintenance room?" Michael stopped. Everyone turned. Tom raised his eyebrows, pretending to think. "Oh, right, our miracle worker here." A low murmur spread through the room. Sarah appeared in the doorway. "Enough, Tom," she said firmly. But Tom kept going. "Come on, Sarah. You think I'm the only one who remembers his record? You know how much damage he caused back then?" Michael looked at him, calm but sharp. "I caused nothing. I paid for something I didn't do." Tom crossed his arms. "And that makes you a saint now?" "No," Michael replied quietly. "Just someone who knows what silence costs." The words hung in the air, heavier than the sound of machines. Sarah stepped between them. "Tom, that's enough. The police report said it happened outside his shift. Don't create more noise than there already is." Tom shrugged, raising his hands. "Sure, let's all believe in fairy tales. Innocent ex-cons fixing our trucks. What could possibly go wrong?" He walked away, laughing, but the laughter lingered, not from him, but from the ones who preferred to mock instead of think. Michael felt the burn in his chest but didn't show it. Instead, he turned back to work, silently. Sarah stayed nearby for a moment, watching him check the compressor system. "You shouldn't let him talk like that," she said softly. Michael smiled faintly. "I've been called worse by people who knew me better. But you don't deserve this." "No one does, but some of us can handle it better than others." She hesitated, then asked, "Why did you come back, Carter, to this company of all places?" He looked at her, the hint of a shadow in his eyes. "Because I don't run from ghosts. I fix them." The air grew quiet. Even the hum of engines seemed to fade. Later that day, during lunch break, Michael sat alone at a table near the back. A few workers ate together, laughing. None invited him. He unfolded a small paper bag, just a sandwich and black coffee. As he ate, Ben appeared with a hesitant smile. "Mind if I sit here?" Michael gestured for him too. "Sure, kid." Ben sat, fidgeting with his soda can. "My dad, he used to say that when people talk behind your back, it means you're ahead of them." Michael looked up. "Your dad's a smart man. He passed away last year." Michael lowered his head. "Sorry." Ben forced a smile. "He'd like you. You're the kind of guy who fixes things, instead of complaining." For the first time that day, Michael truly smiled. "Tell you what, Ben, the trick is, sometimes the hardest thing to fix isn't metal, it's trust." Ben nodded slowly, as if the words had weight he could feel. Across the room, Tom watched from a distance, eyes narrowed, the kind of stare that says this isn't over. Michael finished his coffee, wiped his hands and stood up. The clock ticked loudly. Another day in the yard, another test from Destiny. And Destiny, patient as ever, was far from done with him. Sometimes, the moment that saves you doesn't come from luck. It comes from what you never stopped believing you could do. That same afternoon, the heat in the warehouse was suffocating. The hum of machinery filled every corner, and the smell of diesel mixed with the metallic taste of sweat. It was one of those days when everything and everyone seemed ready to snap. Tom stood near the office door, arguing with a truck driver whose vehicle had broken down in the middle of a delivery. "The brake's locked again," the driver said angrily. "You people don't know what you're doing," Tom barked back. "Hey, we're fixing it, okay? Don't tell me how to run my team." Michael watched from a distance. He'd seen that truck before, the same model that had given them trouble for weeks, and he knew that tone in Tom's voice, frustration mixed with panic. Sarah approached, clipboard in hand. "Carter," she said, "you think you can take a look? The truck's supposed to leave in 2 hours." Tom turned sharply. "Oh no, he's not touching it. Last thing I need is him breaking it worse." Sarah raised an eyebrow. "Then fix it yourself." Tom hesitated, jaw tight. Michael stepped forward calmly. "I'll take a look. If it's not fixed in 20 minutes, I'll step aside." Tom laughed. "You've got 15. Michael climbed into the truck. The smell of burned rubber hit his nose immediately. He pressed the brake pedal. Too soft. The hydraulic pressure wasn't holding. He opened the panel, touched the fluid line and frowned, a subtle vibration beneath the valve. "Somebody installed the wrong seal," he muttered. He grabbed a small toolkit, removed the faulty piece, and replaced it with one from his own pocket, a used part he'd saved months ago, just in case. Sarah watched from the doorway. Her eyes followed every precise movement, the calm, the focus, the hands of someone who didn't just repair. He understood. 10 minutes later, Michael turned the ignition. The engine growled, then stabilized. He pressed the brakes, perfect pressure. He jumped down from the cab and nodded toward the driver. "Try it now." The driver climbed in, started the truck, and rolled forward a few meters. The wheels locked exactly as they should, smooth, controlled, safe. The man leaned out of the window, surprised. "What did you do? No one's been able to fix this thing for weeks." Michael wiped his hands on a rag. "Sometimes the problem isn't the part, it's the person who stopped listening to the machine." A hush fell over the yard. Even Tom was speechless. Sarah smiled. Not wide, but enough. "That's twice you've done what no one else could," she said quietly. Michael shrugged. Guess I got lucky. No, she replied. Guess you remembered who you are. Ben approached, eyes bright. Carter, that was amazing. Michael patted his shoulder. Nothing amazing, kid. Just a man and a machine trying not to give up on each other. Tom finally broke the silence. Well, don't get too comfortable. A fluke doesn't make you a hero. Michael looked at him, calm. I'm not looking to be one. He walked away, the sound of his boots echoing against the concrete. Sarah watched him leave. She turned to Tom. You know what the difference between you two is? Tom frowned. What? He fixes things. You break people. Tom's jaw clenched. She walked off before he could respond. As the sun began to set, Michael sat on the back steps of the warehouse, wiping the grease from his hands. He pulled the folded letter from his pocket again, staring at the faded ink, his son's name at the top, his own shaky handwriting beneath. He didn't open it. He didn't need to. The letter had become something else now, not a confession, but a reminder. The sound of the truck's engine, still running strong, filled the air, blending with the hum of the city. For a brief moment, Michael felt something he hadn't in years. Hope. Respect doesn't come from shouting louder. It comes from proving in silence what others can only talk about. The next few days changed something in the air. It wasn't loud or obvious. It was subtle, like when a storm moves on, but the ground is still wet. People had started watching Michael differently. He didn't notice it at first. The glances weren't as sharp, the whispers faded sooner, and some of the mechanics even asked him small questions about repairs. Not out of curiosity, but out of trust. For the first time in years, his name wasn't said as an accusation. It was said as advice. In the cafeteria, Ben sat across from him again, eating fast. Hey, Carter. Reed wants all the engines ready for inspection by Friday. Think we can do it? Michael took a sip of black coffee. We can if everyone stops arguing and starts listening to the machines. Ben laughed. That's what Sarah said you'd say. Sarah walked in just then, holding a new report. Speaking of which, she said, setting the folder on the table, you saved the company yesterday. Michael frowned. I just fixed a truck. Yeah. The one that carries our biggest contract with the city. If it had failed on the road, we'd have lost everything. He froze, not knowing what to say. Sarah continued, Mr. Reed knows what you did. He asked me about you. I told him the truth, that you're not just a mechanic. You're an engineer of patience. Michael let out a small, awkward laugh. I don't think that's an actual title. It should be, she replied, smiling. Tom walked by at that exact moment, pretending to check a clipboard. Engineer of patience, huh? Maybe you can engineer some luck while you're at it. Sarah shot him a cold glance. Luck has nothing to do with what he does. Tom ignored her, walking away, but the bitterness in his eyes said enough. That afternoon, a light rain fell over Cincinnati. The drops hit the warehouse roof like quiet applause. Michael stayed behind after everyone left, double-checking the machines. Each sound, each vibration was like a heartbeat he could read without looking. As he worked, Sarah returned, holding 2 cups of coffee. I figured you'd still be here. He smiled faintly. You figured right. She handed him a cup and leaned against a workbench. You don't stop, do you? I can't. When I stop, I start thinking. About what? He hesitated. The things I can't fix. Sarah looked at him carefully, understanding that his words carried more than engines behind them. She didn't ask more. Sometimes silence was the only language pain allowed. After a moment, she said softly, You know, people are starting to see you differently. People change fast, he replied. Not this time. They've seen enough to know who you really are. He didn't respond. Instead, he turned toward the open garage door. The rain had stopped. The light coming through the clouds made the wet asphalt shimmer. Sarah watched him, her voice almost a whisper. You said once that machines talk when you listen. Maybe people do too. Michael nodded slowly, eyes fixed on the horizon. Yeah, maybe I just never stayed long enough to hear them. For a few seconds, neither of them spoke. Only the soft ticking of cooling engines filled the space. Then Sarah smiled. "Get some rest, Carter. You've earned it." He turned to her, the faintest trace of peace in his eyes. "Rest is for things that stop working. I'm just getting started." She laughed lightly as she walked away. For the first time in a long time, she believed him. Michael stood alone, watching the city lights flicker beyond the factory walls. The smell of rain mixed with oil in the air. Familiar, grounding. He reached into his pocket, feeling the folded letter. Still there, still waiting, and for the first time he didn't feel afraid to open it. Not yet, but soon, because destiny had begun to change the way it looked at him, and for the first time, so had he. Sometimes destiny tests you not with failure, but with the chance to do the right thing when no one's watching. 2 days later, the rain finally cleared. The morning sun hit the damp pavement outside Reed & Sons, painting everything in shades of gold and grey. Inside the main hangar, work had just begun. The sound of drills, wrenches, and the constant thrum of diesel engines filling the air. Michael stood by a truck, sleeves rolled up, focused on a hydraulic system that refused to hold pressure. The smell of oil mixed with sweat. He barely noticed Sarah approaching behind him. "Carter," she said softly, "we've got a problem." He didn't look up. "What kind of problem?" "The kind that involves a deadline and a family." He turned to her, confused. She held a folder in her hands. Inside were papers marked "Urgent" in red ink. "This delivery here," she continued, "is medicine for a children's hospital in Columbus. If it doesn't leave today, the shipment expires. The truck's transmission failed last night." Michael wiped his hands on a rag. "Who's assigned to it?" "Tom." Michael froze. Of course it was Tom. Sarah sighed. "I know it's a lot to ask, but can you help? If that truck doesn't move in the next 3 hours, those kids lose their treatment." He didn't need to think. "I'll do it." Sarah hesitated. "You sure? It's the same line he worked on. I don't want this to look like another sabotage issue." Michael looked her straight in the eye. "I don't care how it looks. I care that it works." Without another word, he grabbed his tools and walked toward the damaged truck. Tom watched from across the yard, suspicion written all over his face. "What's he doing on my truck?" he shouted. Sarah answered calmly. "He's making sure children get their medicine, Tom. You should try that kind of work sometime." Tom muttered something under his breath but didn't move. Michael crawled under the truck, the metal still warm from the morning sun. He touched the transmission housing. Loose bolts, uneven wear. Whoever worked on it last had rushed the job. He began tightening, adjusting, working fast but precise. His burned hands ached, but he ignored the pain. Ben came over, holding a flashlight. "Need help, Mr. Carter?" Michael nodded. "Keep the light steady. I can't afford shadows right now." Time passed. Each turn of the wrench was a heartbeat. Each click echoed like a countdown. After 2 hours, he climbed out, face smeared with grease, eyes bloodshot but alive. "Try the ignition," he said to Ben. The young man turned the key. The engine coughed once, then roared to life. Michael listened closely. No vibrations, no stutter. Perfect. Sarah clapped once, relief flooding her face. "You did it." Michael looked at the clock. "Not yet. It still has to make it there." Tom crossed his arms. "You're really playing the hero, huh? Fixing the truck I was already handling?" Michael turned to him, calm but firm. "This isn't about you or me. It's about someone out there waiting for what's in that trailer." Tom laughed bitterly. "You always need to look noble, don't you, even when no one asked for it?" Michael stared at him. "You don't do the right thing because someone's watching. You do it because someone needs it." Tom's smirk faded, replaced by something else. Discomfort. He looked away. As the truck pulled out of the yard, heading toward the hospital, Michael watched silently. The sound of the engine faded down the road. Sarah stood beside him. "You didn't have to step in like that." "Yes, I did." "Why?" "Because once someone depended on me too, and I failed." Sarah studied his face. That sentence, quiet, heavy, said more than a story ever could. The sun hit the warehouse windows, reflecting a glare across the floor. For a moment, Michael's shadow stretched long behind him. A man who had once been broken, now standing between what he lost and what he was still trying to save. Sarah whispered almost to herself, "Maybe this is the moment destiny stops testing you and starts trusting you." He didn't answer. He just kept watching the road. The truck disappeared in the distance, and for the first time in years, Michael Carter smiled. Not because he was forgiven, but because he finally remembered what it felt like to be needed. Destiny doesn't test your strength when you're ready. It tests you when you've already given everything you had. 3 days later, the warehouse was quieter than usual. The truck carrying the hospital shipment had made it to Columbus on time. The medicine was delivered. Everyone at Reed & Sons seemed to know it, though no one spoke about it openly. But destiny never lets peace last too long. Late that afternoon, Sarah burst into the workshop, holding a clipboard and a look of worry. "Carter, we've got a serious problem," she said. Michael looked up from the engine he was repairing. "What is it?" "The city contract, the one that keeps this place alive. The inspection's been moved to tomorrow morning." Michael frowned. "That's impossible. Half of those trucks aren't ready." "I know," she replied, "but Mr. Reed said if we fail, the company loses the deal. That's dozens of jobs gone." Michael leaned against the workbench. "Then we don't fail." Sarah nodded. "I'll get the crew." But when she turned, Tom was already standing by the doorway, arms crossed. "Don't bother," he said coldly. "Half the crew walked out an hour ago." "What?" Sarah snapped. "They're tired of overtime, and of him." He nodded toward Michael. "They don't like working under a convict pretending to be a saint." Sarah stepped forward, angry. "This isn't about you, Tom." "Sure it is," he said, "because if this inspection goes wrong, Reed's going to need someone to blame, and we both know who that'll be." Michael looked at him, calm but sharp. "Then I'll take the blame, as long as the trucks run." Tom smirked. "Good luck doing that alone." He walked off. The silence that followed was heavy. Sarah turned to Michael. "What are you going to do?" He grabbed his gloves. "What I always do." The next hours became a race against time. Engines roared, wrenches clanged, the air smelled of oil and burnt metal. Michael moved from truck to truck, testing, tuning, fixing. Every sound became a code he could read, every vibration a heartbeat he had to keep alive. Ben arrived halfway through the night, hair messy, eyes half open. "You didn't think I'd let you do this alone, did you?" Michael smiled faintly. "Grab a wrench. We've got work to do." Together they worked in silence. Sarah coordinated the paperwork, checking off each finished repair. The clock on the wall ticked louder with each passing minute. By 3 in the morning, exhaustion hit like a hammer. Michael's hands were trembling, the old burns reopening under the gloves. But he didn't stop. Ben looked at him, worried. "Mr. Carter, you need a break." Michael shook his head. "Brakes don't fix engines." At 4, the last truck refused to start. A dead engine, no response, no noise, just silence. Michael stared at it, breathing hard. Sarah approached. "Maybe it's a wiring issue. We can figure it out in the morning." "There won't be a morning if we fail this." He climbed inside, lifted the hood, and started testing connections. His fingers moved automatically, guided by instinct more than thought. Finally, he found it. A melted relay hidden behind the main fuse box. He replaced it with a spare, tightened the bolts, and tried again. The engine sputtered, then came to life. The sound filled the warehouse like a heartbeat returning after flatline. Ben jumped up, cheering. Sarah laughed, covering her face with both hands. Michael leaned against the hood, exhausted, the hum of the machine vibrating through his bones. For a few seconds, he just stood there, eyes closed, breathing in the sound. Reed appeared in the doorway, surprised. "You're still here?" Michael opened his eyes. "Didn't want you to wake up to bad news." Reed walked closer, scanning the trucks, all lined up, ready for inspection. He nodded slowly. "I don't know how you did it, Carter." Michael smiled weakly. "I listened." Reed tilted his head. "To what?" to what was still working. Reed stared at him for a long moment, then extended his hand. "Good work." Michael hesitated, then shook it. His hands were covered in oil, Reed's spotless, but that handshake meant more than a promotion or a paycheck. It was acknowledgement. Behind them, the sky began to lighten. The first trucks rumbled to life, ready for inspection. Sarah watched from a distance, smiling. And for the first time, she saw in Michael not a man trying to survive, but a man leading others through the storm. The engine roared again, echoing through the warehouse, and above that sound, one thought burned quietly in Michael's chest. Maybe destiny wasn't punishing him anymore. Maybe it was trusting him to finish the story right. The worst prison isn't the one with bars, it's the guilt you carry in silence. Night had fallen again. The warehouse was empty, except for the soft hum of a cooling engine and the flickering light above the workbench. Michael sat on the concrete floor, back against the wall, grease on his arms, exhaustion in his bones. He wasn't fixing anything this time. He just sat there, breathing, listening to the faint rhythm of the machines around him. Sarah came back to grab a clipboard she'd forgotten. When she saw him there, alone and still, she stopped. "Carter, you okay?" He looked up slowly. "The sound of the motor helps me think," he said quietly. "When it stops, the silence hurts more." She hesitated, then sat beside him on the floor. Neither spoke for a while. The wind whistled through the gaps in the door. Michael reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded, worn-out piece of paper. "Ever heard of words that weigh more than steel?" he asked. Sarah frowned gently. "What's that?" "A letter," he said. "Wrote it 3 years ago. Never had the guts to send it." He unfolded it carefully. The paper was yellowed and creased with a small tear in the corner. Sarah said nothing. She just waited. Michael began to read, his voice low and rough. "Ethan, if you ever read this, maybe I'm not around anymore. I wanted you to know I'm not the man they said I was. I made mistakes, but not the kind they think. I let a friend take the fall for something I should have stopped. And because of that, I lost everything." He stopped, swallowed hard, then continued. "The shop was robbed by a new employee. I found out who it was, but the owner blamed me. I could have proven it wasn't me, but I'd have had to expose the guy, and he had a little girl, so I stayed quiet. Thought I was doing the right thing, but my silence cost me my life." His voice cracked. Sarah's eyes glistened. "So that's why you went to prison?" she asked softly. He nodded. "Accessory to theft. Paperwork said I was guilty. And sometimes the system believes paper more than people." He folded the letter again, slowly, as if returning part of his soul to its box. "You know what hurt the most?" he said quietly. "It wasn't losing my job or the cell. It was seeing my boy in court, and watching him believe what they said about me." Sarah placed a hand on his. "Where is he now?" "With his mom, in Columbus. Haven't seen him in 3 years." The room fell silent again, the kind of silence that feels alive. Sarah squeezed his hand gently. "You're not what happened to you, Michael." He stared at the floor, his eyes wet. "I know, but sometimes the world won't let you forget." She took a breath. "Maybe it's time to send that letter." He looked at her, tired but thoughtful. "Maybe, but I think destiny hasn't finished reading it yet." Outside, thunder rolled in the distance. Ben appeared at the door, soaked from the rain. "Carter, Mr. Reed needs to see you first thing in the morning. Says it's important." Michael nodded. "Thanks, kid. Go home. It's late." When Ben left, Michael stared at the ceiling, a faint hum of electricity, the smell of oil and rain. He saw his son's face in his mind, smiling, curious, the way he used to hold tools like they were treasures. He remembered the day he promised himself he'd be a better man. Now that promise was all he had left. The paper in his hand grew damp from the drops falling off his hair. He pressed it gently, feeling its weight. The letter wasn't just words. It was everything he couldn't say, and everything destiny already knew. Michael stood up slowly, turned off the lights, and walked toward the door. In the dark, The machines kept ticking softly, like a heart that refused to stop beating, and in the silence he whispered to no one in particular, "Let destiny read it before it's too late." Sometimes all a man needs is someone who can see past what the world decided he was. The next morning came grey and cold. A thin fog covered the streets of Cincinnati, turning the industrial district into a blur of steel and silence. Michael arrived early, as always. The smell of metal and diesel filled the air, the same smell that had followed him for most of his life. He didn't know what Mr. Reed wanted, but something in his chest told him it wasn't bad news. When he entered the office, the older man was already there, sitting behind his desk, reading a report with quiet intensity. "Carter," Reed said, not looking up. "Sit down." Michael obeyed, cautious. Reed closed the folder and leaned back. "I reviewed the footage from the cameras we installed in the yard." Michael frowned. "Cameras?" Reed nodded. "Yes, after the last sabotage. I needed to know who was coming in at night." He turned the monitor toward Michael. The image was grainy, black and white. A figure moved between the trucks, flashlight in hand, crouching near the fuel line. Reed hit pause. The face was clear enough. Tom Reynolds. Michael stared at the screen, silent. Reed sighed. "I had a feeling, but I wanted to be sure." He stood, walking toward the window. "Carter, this company nearly collapsed because of pride and arrogance. Mine included. I thought I could judge a man by his file. But you've proven me wrong." Michael didn't know what to say. Reed turned back. "I'm reinstating you, effective immediately, head of maintenance, full salary, and I want you leading the new training program with Sarah." Michael blinked, almost not believing it. I don't know what to say." "Say you'll do what you've always done," Reed replied. "The right thing." A silence filled the room, not heavy, but clean. Michael nodded. "I'll do my best." "I know you will," Reed said softly, "because your best is the reason this company is still standing." When Michael walked out of the office, Sarah was waiting in the hallway. Her expression was cautious, curious. "Well?" He smiled, small but real. "He knows. About Tom. And you? Got something I never expected to get again." "What's that?" "Trust." Sarah's eyes softened. "You deserved it a long time ago." They walked through the corridor together. Workers passed by, nodding to him. Some smiled. For the first time, he wasn't invisible. In the yard, Ben ran toward them, holding a wrench. "Mr. Carter, they're saying you're the new boss." Michael laughed quietly. "I'm no boss, kid. Just someone who finally gets to fix things the right way." Ben grinned. "I knew it! Knew you proved them wrong." As they spoke, Tom appeared by the gate. His uniform was wrinkled, his face pale. He avoided everyone's eyes. Michael looked at him, but said nothing. Sometimes silence is heavier than punishment. Tom turned away and walked off without a word. Later that evening, when everyone had gone home, Michael stayed behind. He sat by the workbench, pulling 2 sheets of paper from his pocket, the old letter and the new one written in guilt, the other in peace. He placed them side by side. Same words, different man. In the new one, the ink was fresh and steady. He picked up a pen and added a line at the bottom. "Ethan, sometimes life breaks you just to show you what you can still rebuild." He folded both letters together and slipped them into his jacket pocket. Outside, the rain had stopped. The clouds parted, letting a thin beam of sunlight spill through. Sarah stood by the door, watching him quietly. He turned and smiled. "Guess Destiny's finally reading faster." She smiled back. Maybe it just needed a better ending. The sun broke through, lighting the wet pavement. Ben waved from across the yard. Reed watched from his office window. And for the first time in years, Michael Carter felt something new, not victory, not relief, but belonging. Destiny wasn't done with him. It was just beginning to trust him with the next chapter. Destiny only reveals who you are when time is running out. Friday arrived with heavy clouds hanging low over Cincinnati. The air felt charged, thick with humidity and tension. At Reed and Sons, the yard was alive. Trucks lined up, engines humming, workers shouting over the roar of compressors. It should have been a normal day. But destiny was about to light another match. Near 4 in the afternoon, a sharp alarm blared from the main hangar. Sarah burst out of the control room. "Carter! One of the new trucks caught fire in Depot 3. Michael dropped his wrench. "Anyone inside?" "Yeah, Mr. Reed's trying to cut the power." He ran, boots slamming concrete, smoke rising ahead. When he reached the depot, the heat hit him like a wall, flames climbing the walls, oil drums exploding one by one. Through the haze, he saw Reed coughing, struggling with a breaker box. "Get out of there!" Michael shouted. Reed turned, eyes red. "If I don't kill the power, the tanks'll blow!" Michael grabbed his arm. "Let me!" He shoved Reed toward the door and sprinted to the control panel. Sparks jumped. The air smelled of burning plastic. He tried the main switch. Jammed. Sarah's voice echoed from outside. "The circuit's shorted." "I know!" he yelled back. "What are you going to do?" "What I always do. Improvise." He tore the panel open with a screwdriver, sliced through melted insulation with his pocket knife, and began rerouting the live wires by hand. The metal burned hot, even through the cloth wrapped around his palms. The roar of fire was deafening. Reed, watching from the doorway, shouted, "Carter, you'll get yourself killed!" Michael gritted his teeth. "Not yet!" He pulled the final cable. A bright flash, then darkness. The hangar lights flickered out. The pump motors died. For a long second, the fire seemed to hesitate, then lose strength. Outside, Sarah and Ben charged in with extinguishers. A dozen workers formed a bucket line from the hydrant. Within minutes, the flames shrank to smoke and steam. Michael collapsed to his knees, coughing, his hands blistered and black with soot. Reed rushed in, helping him up. "You just saved half this city," Reed said, voice breaking. Michael caught his breath. "I only did what needed to be done." Reed shook his head. "No, Carter. Anyone else would have run." Sarah knelt beside him, her eyes wide. "Your hands?" He glanced down at the burned skin and smiled faintly. "Nothing a little grease won't hide." Ben stood behind them, staring like he'd just seen a legend come to life. "Mr. Carter, weren't you afraid to die?" Michael looked at the scorched panel, then at the sky outside. "I already did once, kid. The rest is just living different." Outside, the rain finally broke, heavy, cleansing. Water poured through the broken roof, hissing as it met the embers. The noise was like applause from the heavens. Sarah watched him in silence. Something in his face had changed, a calm deeper than exhaustion, a man who had burned away everything that didn't matter. Reed put a hand on his shoulder. "Carter, I don't know if I believe in destiny." Michael looked at him, half smiling. "I didn't either. But maybe destiny isn't what happens to us. It's what we do with it." Reed nodded slowly, speechless. Around them, the crew began to cheer. The sound wasn't loud. It was pure. Respect. Gratitude. Michael lifted his eyes to the open roof. Rain hit his face, cooling the burns, washing away the smoke. And in that quiet moment, he understood. This was his absolution. Destiny had opened the letter. Even the strongest men bleed in silence when no one is watching. The storm lasted all night. By morning, the sky over Cincinnati was still grey, the ground slick with ash and rain. The air around Reed and Sons smelled of burned rubber and wet metal, the scent of survival mixed with exhaustion. Michael arrived before sunrise. Both of his hands were wrapped in white bandages. Every step made his body ache, but he didn't slow down. Pain was nothing new. Pain, at least, was honest. Sarah tried to stop him at the gate. "You shouldn't be here," she said softly. "I can't stay home knowing there's work unfinished. You nearly burned your hands off. I've had worse." She looked at him, sadness and admiration fighting in her eyes. "One day, Carter, you've got to let someone else help carry it." He smiled faintly. "Maybe someday. Not today." Inside the hangar, the air was heavy with quiet respect. Workers paused as he walked by. No jokes this time, no whispers, just nods. Tom wasn't among them, but he appeared later, walking in with his shoulders tight and his jaw clenched. His face was pale, his eyes restless. He stopped a few feet from Michael. "So," Tom said, voice low, "you're the hero now?" Michael didn't look up. "Just doing my job." "Yeah? Or maybe trying to clean up your name?" Ben stepped forward. "Leave him alone, Tom." Tom sneered. "Easy, kid. You don't know what kind of man he really is." Michael finally turned, his calm steadying the whole room. "Say what you came to say." Tom's lip curled. "I came to remind you, people like you don't change. They just hide it better." Sarah appeared from her office, her tone sharp. "That's enough, Tom." "You don't tell me what's enough." "I do when you're poisoning the room." The tension hung like a knife, and then, before anyone could move, Mr. Reed's voice came from behind them. "You're right about one thing, Tom," he said coldly. "Enough is enough." Everyone turned. Reed was standing by the door with a folder in his hand. He threw it on the table. Inside were printed stills from the security footage. Tom's face, frozen mid-act, tampering with the trucks. The color drained from Tom's skin. "Sir, Reed cut him off. "You nearly got people killed. Pack your things. You're done." Tom's mouth opened, but no sound came. He looked at Michael, eyes full of something that wasn't anger anymore, just fear. Then he walked out, the echo of his boots fading into nothing. When the silence settled, Michael exhaled deeply. Relief, exhaustion, maybe both. He felt his knees weaken. Sarah noticed first. "Carter, you okay?" He tried to answer, but his words tangled with the breath he didn't have. The room tilted. Then everything went dark. Ben caught him before he hit the floor. "Help! Somebody help!" Voices blurred, footsteps rushed. When Michael opened his eyes again, the world was quiet. He was lying on a cot in the company's small infirmary. White ceiling, the smell of antiseptic, rain tapping gently on the window. Sarah sat beside him, holding his hand. "You scared us," she said softly. He smiled weakly. "Just taking a break. Doctor said you passed out from exhaustion." "Oh, guess I finally hit my limit." Her eyes filled with tears. "You don't have to keep proving yourself. Not anymore." Michael looked at the ceiling, his voice barely above a whisper. "I spent so long trying to prove I wasn't the man they said I was. I forgot to be the man I used to be." She squeezed his hand tighter. "The world sees you now, Carter. It's time you see it too." He turned his head toward her, his expression soft, fragile. "Do you think destiny forgives?" Sarah smiled faintly. "Destiny doesn't forgive or condemn. It just waits for you to understand why it hurt." He closed his eyes, a tear slipping down his cheek. Outside, thunder rolled faintly, but it sounded far away now. For the first time, he wasn't afraid of the noise. He wasn't fighting it anymore. As the rain continued, Michael whispered, half dreaming, "Maybe destiny breaks us just enough to let the light in." Sarah brushed his hair from his forehead, whispering back, "Or maybe it rebuilds us so we never break the same way again." He smiled faintly, then drifted back to sleep. The rain eased into silence, and the man who had carried the weight of the world finally rested, not defeated, but emptied of pain. Some rebirths don't start standing. They start on the ground when the soul decides to rise before the body does. 2 days passed since the collapse. The city outside had moved on. Trucks rumbled, factories hummed, but inside the hospital room time stood still. The steady beep of a monitor kept Michael anchored somewhere between waking and rest. Morning light streamed in through the half-open blinds, turning the white walls gold. It was peaceful, almost sacred. Sarah sat in the chair beside him, fast asleep. An empty coffee cup rested in her hand. Her hair was messy, her eyes tired. She hadn't left his side since the night he passed out. When Michael opened his eyes, he didn't move at first. He just watched her, the quiet guardian who'd stayed when everyone else had gone home. "Still here, huh?" he murmured, his voice low and cracked. Sarah stirred, blinking in surprise. "You're awake!" He smiled faintly. "I tried sleeping forever, but destiny wouldn't let me." She exhaled, half laughing, half crying. "Don't joke. You scared us. Guess I'm getting good at that." he said softly. She adjusted the pillow behind his back. "How do you feel?" "Lighter," he said after a pause, "like I left something behind." Sarah studied him for a moment. There was something new in his eyes, calm instead of fatigue, warmth instead of pain. Whatever had broken inside him was no longer sharp. "When I blacked out," he continued, "I heard something. A sound, like an engine starting after years of silence, and I realized it wasn't a machine. It was me." Sarah smiled through her tears. "Maybe it was your heart remembering what hope sounds like." "Maybe," he said softly. "Or maybe it was destiny, tired of waiting for me to listen." The door creaked open. Ben peeked in, holding a small bouquet, wildflowers wrapped in newspaper. "Hey, Mr. Carter, I brought you something," Michael chuckled. "Didn't think mechanics knew anything about flowers." Ben shrugged. "They're for people who fix what's broken." Sarah laughed, shaking her head. "Where'd you find this kid?" Michael looked at Ben, a warmth spreading across his face. "He reminds me of someone." "Your son?" Sarah asked softly. Michael hesitated. "Yeah, he'd be about Ben's age now." The air grew tender and heavy at once. Sarah changed the subject, her tone gentle. "Mr. Reed called, said not to worry about work. The company's back on its feet." Michael smiled faintly. "And Tom?" "Arrested. He confessed to everything." Michael looked out the window. Rain clouds were clearing, sunlight glinting off the wet streets below. "The universe always balances the scales," he said quietly. Sarah leaned closer. "When you're out of here, Reed wants you to head the new project. An old warehouse he's turning into a training center. Said it's yours to run." "Training center?" "Yeah, he wants you to teach. Kids, ex-workers, anyone who needs a second chance." Michael didn't speak for a long time. He stared at his bandaged hands, then at Sarah. "Teach, huh?" She nodded. "It's what you were born to do. You don't just fix engines, Carter. You fix people." The words sank deep. He looked down again, a tear escaping unnoticed. He whispered, almost to himself, "I don't deserve this." Sarah placed her hand gently over his. "You earned it the day you didn't give up." Later, when the room grew quiet again, Michael reached for his jacket on the chair beside him. From its pocket, he pulled out the same letter, creased, old, but still intact. He unfolded it, reread the words, then grabbed a pen from the bedside table. Beneath the last line, he added one more. "Ethan, today, I finally forgave myself." He folded it again and stared out the window. The city below gleamed like a new engine, repaired, alive, moving forward. Sarah returned, carrying 2 coffees. "Thinking about the past?" she asked. He smiled, turning toward her. "No, thinking about how it finally stopped chasing me." She smiled back. "So what now?" "Now," he said, gazing out at the sunrise. "Now I go back." "Back where?" "To the man I was supposed to be." The monitor beeped steadily. Somewhere outside, a truck started, its hum blending with the morning air. Michael closed his eyes and listened, a small smile on his face. For the first time in years, the sound didn't remind him of pain. It reminded him of life. When destiny finally speaks, it doesn't shout your name. It whispers it to the right people. 3 months later, spring had arrived in Cincinnati. The air was warmer, the streets filled with the noise of life returning after a long winter. On the east side of town, the old warehouse that once stored scrap metal now had new walls, bright paint, and a sign above the gate that read, "Carter Training Center, Second Chances." Inside, the sound of tools and laughter blended into something beautiful. The rhythm of people rebuilding their lives. Men and women in work uniforms practiced on old engines, welding frames, fixing carburetors. Everywhere you looked, there was purpose. At the center of it all stood Michael Carter, same calm eyes, same steady hands, but a new light in his posture. He wasn't just fixing machines anymore. He was teaching others how to do it, and how to fix themselves in the process. Sarah walked through the hall holding a clipboard, watching him speak to a group of students. He spoke simply, clearly, not as a man above them, but as one of them. "You don't build engines by force," he told them. You build them by listening. Every sound, every vibration, it's talking to you. You just need to care enough to listen back. Ben, now his assistant, smiled proudly as he handed Michael a new set of wrenches. Looks like you're getting famous, Mr. Carter. The mayor's on his way. Michael chuckled. Famous, huh? I'll believe it when my rent's paid on time. Sarah joined them, smiling. It's true. The city council nominated you for the Civic Honor Award. They say you turned tragedy into opportunity for others. Michael shook his head. I didn't do it alone. None of this would exist without all of you. Sarah stepped closer. Still, you were the one who believed when no one else did. He looked at her, eyes soft. Belief doesn't make you special. What you do after you start believing, that's what matters. A sudden buzz filled the air. Reporters, photographers, city officials entered the room. Applause erupted. Mr. Reed led the group, wearing a suit for the first time anyone could remember. He climbed the small stage with a microphone in hand. Ladies and gentlemen, Reed began, his voice echoing across the workshop. 3 months ago, this man risked his life to save mine and the lives of everyone in that warehouse. But that's not why we're here today. He paused, looking at Michael. We're here because he didn't stop there. He turned a moment of survival into a legacy of hope. He reminded us that redemption isn't something you ask for. It's something you build with your hands. One bolt, one act of kindness at a time. The crowd clapped again. Michael stood still, humble, almost uncomfortable under the attention. Reed continued, Today the city of Cincinnati honors Michael Carter for his courage, integrity, and humanity. He held up a plaque with Michael's name engraved on it. For a moment the room was silent. Then applause thundered through the hall. Students cheered, workers whistled, Sarah wiped her eyes, and Ben clapped so hard his palms turned red. Michael took the plaque slowly. He didn't look at it right away. Instead, he looked around, at the faces, at the laughter, at the life blooming where once there had only been noise and pain. He finally spoke. I don't deserve this, he said quietly. But maybe that's the point. Maybe destiny doesn't give you what you deserve. It gives you what you need to become who you were meant to be. The crowd went silent again, listening. He continued, I lost everything once. My job, my family, my name. I thought that was the end, but I was wrong. The end only comes when you stop believing that something good can still come from you. Sarah looked at him, tears in her eyes. Ben smiled proudly. Reed nodded, proud and silent. Michael lifted the plaque, but not high, just enough to share it with the crowd. This belongs to everyone who ever made a mistake and still chose to stand up again. Applause burst once more, louder this time. And above the noise, the faintest smile crossed Michael's face. Quiet, genuine, peaceful. He turned to Sarah and whispered, I guess destiny finally read my letter. She smiled back. No, she said softly. It answered it. Outside, sunlight broke through the clouds, filling the room with gold. The engines hummed again. Steady, alive, familiar. And somewhere in that sound, if you listened closely, you could almost hear destiny breathing, not as a force above them, but as a companion walking quietly beside them all. What we fix with our hands fades, what we heal in others remains. 1 year later, Cincinnati had changed, or maybe it was Michael who had. The Carter Training Center had grown, more students, more tools, more laughter. What once was a single warehouse was now a small campus of workshops. A second building was under construction, painted with a mural of gears turning into wings. Under it, the words, built by those who refuse to give up. Every morning, Michael arrived early. He still wore the same work jacket, oil stains and all. To him, it was a uniform of humility, a reminder that even miracles start dirty. Inside the main hall, a group of trainees gathered around him. One of them, a teenage girl named Lena, had just finished repairing her first engine. It roared to life with a sharp, proud growl. The whole room cheered. Michael smiled. You hear that? he asked her. She nodded. Sounds perfect. He shook his head gently. No, it sounds alive. That's what perfect really means. She laughed, wiping sweat from her face. Sarah watched from the doorway, arms crossed, the same proud smile she wore every day now. Reed, older but content, occasionally stopped by with new contracts or donations. Even Ben had grown, no longer a kid, now an instructor, teaching the newcomers with the same patience Michael once showed him. The place had become more than a workshop. It was a second-chance factory, for broken people, for lost time, for silent dreams. Michael's letter, the one to his son, was framed on his office wall. Not the original, but a copy. The original had finally reached its destination. Months earlier, Ethan had written back. A short, simple letter. Michael never showed it to anyone, but sometimes, when he sat alone in his office, he unfolded it carefully and read the last line over and over again. Dad, I knew you didn't do it. I was just waiting for you to believe it too. Those words had rebuilt something inside him that no job, no award ever could. The wound had finally closed, not erased, but healed. That afternoon, Michael walked outside, watching the students pack up for the day. The sound of laughter filled the yard. Engines cooled, birds sang. Everything felt exactly as it should. Sarah came up beside him. Big day tomorrow, she said. Why's that? The expansion's opening. They're naming it after you. Michael chuckled. They shouldn't. Ma, they already did, she smiled. The Michael Carter wing, where second chances begin. He laughed softly, eyes lowered. I don't know if I'll ever get used to that. You don't have to, she said. Just keep showing up. They stood together, silent, watching the sun set behind the buildings. The sky burned orange and red, reflecting off the chrome surfaces. Sarah looked at him. You ever think about destiny anymore? Michael smiled, his voice low. Every day, but not like before. I used to think destiny was something that happened to me. Now I know it's something I build, one person at a time. As night fell, the yard lights flickered on. The sound of a truck engine echoed from the distance, familiar, steady, strong. Michael watched it disappear down the street. Maybe that's what we leave behind, he said quietly. Not things that shine, but things that keep moving when we're gone. Sarah nodded. That's called legacy. He smiled. No, that's called destiny. He walked back inside, the smell of oil and life wrapping around him like home. Every wall, every bolt, every tool carried a story, one that began in shame but ended in purpose. And somewhere deep inside that workshop, the same rhythm that had followed him for years still played, the heartbeat of a man who fixed engines and healed souls. The machines hummed softly as the lights dimmed. Destiny had been read, answered, and rewritten, not in ink, but in the lives that would follow. Dune. Destiny doesn't forget those who kept walking, even when no one was watching. 5 years later, the sky over Cincinnati was calm, washed in the soft gold of late afternoon. The city had grown, just as he had. The old factory district was now alive, full of light, families and small workshops born from one man's persistence. A weathered sign still hung above the main entrance. Carter Training Center. Second chances. Inside, a new generation of students worked under the watchful eyes of Ben and Lena. The smell of metal and oil mixed with laughter. On one of the walls, a photo hung framed between 2 shelves of tools. Michael Carter shaking hands with a group of smiling graduates, grease on his palms, pride in his eyes. But Michael wasn't there that day. He was out by the countryside, a few miles beyond the city. A small, quiet house sat on the edge of a field. Its porch overlooked the valley below, where the faint hum of trucks echoed in the distance, the sound of the life he'd built. He sat on a wooden chair, a mug of coffee in one hand and a stack of letters in the other. Each one was from someone who'd passed through the training center. Letters from men who had found work again, from women who'd started their own shops, from kids who'd found purpose where they once saw nothing but walls. He read them slowly, smiling after each one, as if savoring the rhythm of every life changed. Sarah came out, grey now in her hair, but still carrying that same quiet strength. "You never get tired of those letters, do you?" she asked. He smiled. "They remind me that the engines weren't the only things worth fixing." She sat beside him, handing him a new envelope. "Another one came this morning." He looked at it. The handwriting was familiar, shaky, but careful. He opened it slowly. Inside was a simple note, written in blue ink. "Dad, I'm coming to visit next weekend. I want to see where destiny took you. Love, Ethan." For a long moment, Michael didn't speak. He just held the letter, the words trembling slightly in his hand. Then he smiled, the kind of smile that only comes after a lifetime of storms. He looked out across the horizon. The wind carried the smell of oil, rain, and spring. Somewhere far off, an engine started. Steady, strong, familiar. He closed his eyes and listened. That sound, the hum of life, the whisper of redemption, filled the air like music. Sarah touched his arm gently. "What are you thinking about?" He smiled softly. "I was just remembering something I once said." "What's that?" "That destiny reads our letters, but sometimes it writes back." They sat in silence, watching the sun sink behind the hills. The sky turned amber, then deep red, then calm blue. And for the first time in forever, everything was exactly where it belonged. The mug of coffee cooled, the last light faded, but the sound of that engine, that steady, faithful hum, went on.